Do your ideas change anything? Or do they live and die inside your head, brilliant but inert? William James believed that the truth of an idea is not measured by its elegance, but by its effects. In this video, we walk with him through the fierce, liberating insight at the core of his philosophy, that thoughts only become true when they prove themselves in life. This is not relativism. This is radical responsibility. It means your beliefs are not private, they are proposals for action. They shape your attention, your choices, your relationships, your world. In a time when many worship clarity while ignoring consequence, James invites us to a different standard. Does your idea make a difference? Does it heal, move, clarify, guide? Can it be lived? We'll explore how James' pragmatism turns ideas into living truths, how it challenges abstraction, invites experimentation, and demands that we test every insight against the weight of experience. You'll learn not just how to think, but how to live your thinking. This is not philosophy as theory. This is philosophy as risk, as method, as practice. This is about becoming someone whose thoughts are not just interesting, but useful, transformative, real. Stay with us. The truth isn't waiting to be found. It's waiting to be made. It begins in the most ordinary place, a moment of hesitation. You have an idea, maybe it's a conviction, maybe just a hunch, and the question rises, is it true? For most of history, philosophy answered this question with a comparison. Truth was what matched reality, mirrored it, described it accurately. But William James stood before this tradition and asked a different question. What happens when we treat truth not as a mirror but as a tool? From this question emerged one of the most daring philosophical moves of the modern era. James refused to treat ideas as finished entities, existing in some abstract realm. He insisted that every idea is a beginning. That belief is a form of action. That the truth of any thought is not what it says, but what it does. This insight was not born from theory alone. James had lived its urgency. He had suffered paralysis by doubt and had discovered that only action, only commitment could dissolve the fog. In that crucible, he saw that truth must prove itself in the field of life, in behavior, in risk, in time. He wrote, "The true is the name of whatever proves itself to be good in the way of belief, and good, too, for definite, assignable reasons." It is not enough for an idea to be coherent. It must be consequential. It must work. This is pragmatism, not as a shortcut, but as a discipline. It asks, when this idea enters your mind, your heart, your behavior, what changes? What becomes possible? What becomes impossible? Ideas, in James' view, are instruments. They must be handled, tested, adjusted. They are not trophies. They are tools. And if a tool does not help you build a better life, it is not true, no matter how elegant it may seem. To read James is to enter a world where the philosopher is no longer a distant observer, but a craftsman of the real, where you are not a passive container of truth, but a co-creator of it. And if this perspective opens something in you, stay close. Like, subscribe, and let's keep building. Pragmatism, for William James, was not just a method. It was a rebellion against the sterile obsession with systems that never touched life. He saw the world flooded with ideas, religious, political, metaphysical, none of which seemed to change the people who held them. What good is a belief, he asked, if it cannot survive the test of reality? He did not dismiss theory. He demanded more from it. For James, an idea's destiny matters more than its pedigree. He turned away from the philosophical obsession with origins, where did this idea come from, and toward outcomes, what happens if we believe it? To illustrate this, he gave examples that were raw, human, unavoidable. Suppose you believe in free will. That belief will alter how you perceive your choices, your failures, your capacity to change. It will shape how you treat others, whether you hold them accountable, whether you forgive. That belief is not neutral. It becomes a force in the world. Now, suppose you believe everything is determined. That belief, too, becomes a structure. It can paralyze or liberate, depending on how it is lived. James insisted that these beliefs must be evaluated not only by how logically consistent they are, but by what they generate in lived experience. And this was his genius. He gave us permission to think like moral scientists, to test truth by its consequences, to treat every thought as a hypothesis, every conviction as an experiment. In this light, no belief is sacred until it works. And working, for James, means more than functioning. It means enriching life, expanding possibility, strengthening the self, deepening relationships. A true idea is one that makes a better world more likely. This approach terrified many philosophers. It meant truth was not fixed, not final. It meant truth could grow, could shift, could die. But for James, that was not a flaw, it was freedom. Because a truth that grows is a truth that lives. There is a peculiar boldness in James' philosophy, the claim that truth itself is unfinished, not simply undiscovered, not merely unknown, but actively being made. Every belief we adopt, every choice we make, every value we live into, these are not reflections of a pre-existing order. They are contributions to a universe still in the making. This is the beating heart of Jamesian pragmatism. Truth is not something you find. It is something you participate in. In this framework, ideas are alive. They evolve. They grow in use. They deepen through application. They mature in relation. And just like any living thing, they demand care, risk, feedback, and revision. Truth is not the endpoint of certainty. It is the byproduct of honest engagement. James challenged the idea that we must prove something before we can act on it. He saw that in real life, the opposite is often true. Sometimes we must act first, believe first before the evidence appears. We must risk ourselves in faith that the belief will justify itself. This is not irrationality. This is moral courage. Called it the will to believe, not a license for delusion, but a defense of necessary risk. For example, believing that change is possible in yourself or others, that justice is achievable, that love is worth giving. These beliefs may not come with guarantees, but James shows us their truth emerges through the life they enable. This is how ideas become practical truths. Not through proclamation, but through participation. They must survive contact with reality. They must endure contradiction, resistance, disappointment, and still give life. He writes, truth happens to an idea. It becomes true, is made true by events. This is the world James invites us into, a world where thinking is never finished, where belief is moral architecture, where every insight must be tested not in the mind, but in the full texture of living. This is not intellectual convenience. It is existential responsibility. There is a strange reverence in the way James approaches error not as failure, but as a necessary condition for discovering truth that matters. In the pragmatic view, error is not the enemy of knowledge, it is the cost of relevance. To turn an idea into a practical truth, you must be willing to get it wrong first. This alone sets James apart. In a philosophical tradition obsessed with certainty, he invites fallibility, not as a concession, but as a method. He asks, what is the risk of error compared to the risk of paralysis? What happens if we refuse to act until we are sure? What truths will we never live because we waited too long to believe? And so James gives us the concept of the live hypothesis, an idea that might be true, that we feel invited to try. It's not proven, it may not be provable, but it calls us. It suggests a direction, a possible world. He urges us to act on these hypotheses, not recklessly, but with seriousness. Because when we act on an idea, the world begins to change in response. Doors open, consequences appear. Our very perception shifts. And that feedback loop helps the idea either prove itself or fall away. And here, James inserts a question that echoes beyond philosophy. What beliefs are you avoiding, not because they are false, but because they require you to change? He knew that the most dangerous ideas are not the ones that deceive us. They are the ones we ignore out of fear. Because once lived, they might demand new behaviors, new identities, new risks. And this is the pragmatic path. Not to adopt ideas because they feel good, but because they make good possible. Truth, for James, is not something we claim. It is something we demonstrate. If James had one moral insistence, it was this: ideas must touch the ground. They must walk through daily life, through difficulty, through uncertainty, through the full spectrum of human contradiction. Otherwise, they remain sterile, unfelt, unused, unreal. He saw that many philosophies spoke in abstractions but feared action. They offered truth as something cold and completed, untouched by desire, by failure, by the aching need to live meaningfully. James rejected that. He offered a truth that bleeds, that breathes, that sweats under pressure. This is where personal transformation enters the pragmatic field. Not as a psychological detour, but as a central concern. If an idea cannot help you, become someone more honest, more attentive, more courageous, more free. What is its use? James insisted that the test of truth must include the moral fruits of a belief. He was not asking, does it make you feel good? He was asking, does it enlarge you? Does it make you more capable of facing complexity, enduring ambiguity, acting with intention? He gave the example of religious belief not as a metaphysical claim to be proven, but as a lived hypothesis. Does the belief in a larger meaning bring you energy, perseverance, ethical clarity? Then it may be true in the only sense that matters. Not because it matches some divine blueprint, but because it enables a better life. This is where James pushes pragmatism into existential territory. Truth is not just what works mechanically, it's what works morally. It must elevate, orient, empower. Not every idea can do that. Many fail, many seduce, many shrink the self instead of expanding it. So, again, he demands, test your ideas not by how elegant they are, but by how much life they make possible. This is not a simple task. It is a lifelong one. But it is the only one worthy of a thinking soul. James never believed that thinking alone could save us. For him, the idea was only the beginning. What mattered most was what followed: the act, the change, the reorientation of life. And in this way, he demanded something radical from the mind, not brilliance, but sincerity. The sixth lesson in turning ideas into practical truths is this: every belief is a commitment. This is why James feared the philosophical pose of detachment. He believed it fostered cowardice. He saw that many thinkers preferred doubt not because they were rigorous, but because they were afraid. Afraid to act, to risk, to believe before the world guaranteed their safety. But life, James knew, does not wait for intellectual approval. It confronts us with moral choices, existential forks, spiritual needs. And if we refuse to believe until we are certain, we risk losing the very truth we seek. So he reverses the equation. It is not belief that should wait on proof. It is proof that sometimes must wait on belief. And this changes everything. It means you cannot hide behind the claim, I don't know, forever. At some point, you must choose what to live as if it were true. And you must accept that the truth of that belief will only emerge through the life you live in response to it. He gives us this test. What idea are you willing to suffer for? What belief do you hold that requires your effort, your courage, your presence? This is how we know an idea is becoming a practical truth, not when we defend it, but when we embody it. When it shapes how we listen, how we love, how we change. Ideas in James' world are not decorations. They are directions. And each one you follow writes a line in the story of who you are becoming. So he asks again, not with condemnation, but with clarity. Are you willing to let your beliefs cost you something? Because only then do they begin to matter. In James' world, no truth is final, and no belief is exempt from review. This is not because truth doesn't exist, but because experience keeps unfolding. The seventh insight into turning ideas into practical truths is that every truth is provisional, conditional, alive. It must be tended like a fire. James wrote, "Our minds must change from point to point. Our principles must be modified by facts." This is not intellectual instability. It is moral maturity. It is the recognition that truth, once detached from experience, becomes dogma. And dogma, even when correct, can become cruel. This means the most practical ideas are not fixed formulas. They are evolving commitments. They grow with us. They are reshaped by new evidence, deeper relationships, unexpected suffering, sudden joy. And so we must hold our beliefs like we hold living things, with attention, with care, with readiness to revise. James invites us to become philosophers of our own lives. Not in the academic sense, but in the deepest, existential one, testing every conviction in action, watching its effects, revising where needed, and reaffirming where fruitful. This demands humility, because it means even our most sacred truths might need to change. And it demands courage, because it means we may outgrow the very beliefs that once saved us. But it also grants power. The power to co-create a world, not from rigid ideals, but from adaptable wisdom. The power to respond to life, rather than retreat from it. In this way, James gave us not just a method, but a way to live awake. A way to hold truth as something earned, not possessed. And so we ask, what truths in your life need to be retested, not because they failed, but because you have changed? James would not answer for you, but he would insist you ask. James knew that ideas do not live in books, they live in consequences. And the eighth lesson in turning ideas into practical truths is this: truth requires contact. It must touch others. It must enter the world through relationship, friction, risk. An idea, no matter how noble, is not true until it moves through time, through conflict, through the lives of others, and comes out transformed or transforming. This is where James deepens the ethical demand of pragmatism. Belief is never private. Every conviction we carry shapes how we see, speak, act. And in doing so, it touches others, guides or misguides, helps or harms. The moment we live a belief, it enters the moral fabric of the world. This means we are responsible not only for what we believe, but for what our beliefs do. This is why James insisted that truth is social. Not because consensus determines it, but because every truth worth living must prove itself in the shared world. Not just in solitude, but in solidarity. He invites us to test ideas not only in our minds, but in dialogue. With people who contradict. us, with those we fear, with those we misunderstand. And if our truth cannot survive that contact, if it harms more than it helps, then we must question whether it was true at all. This is not weakness. It is rigor. Because the real test of a belief is not whether it impresses the thinker, but whether it sustains the human. And so James would have us ask, what happens to the world when you live this truth? Who becomes more free? who becomes more real? Who gets left behind? In this question, truth ceases to be a noun. It becomes a verb, and in that verb, test, live, shape, revise, we find not certainty, but meaning. Here, at the edge of James' pragmatism, we stand not before a conclusion, but a choice. The final insight is the most intimate. You are part of the truth's becoming. James rejected the idea of truth as a distant light we discover. Instead, he taught that each of us is a spark that through our thinking, risking, failing, rethinking, we ignite new realities. His philosophy was not about describing the world. It was about shaping it with attention, with effort, with care. This is the terrifying and liberating consequence of pragmatism. Truth is what we help bring about, not alone, not arbitrarily, but through participation, through fidelity to experience, through moral imagination. This does not mean all ideas are equal. It means all truths must earn their name in life, through consequences, through practice, through what they enable in us and in others. So James leaves us with responsibility not to defend ideas, but to embody them, not to cling to belief, but to let it grow, not to speak of truth, but to become the kind of person whose presence makes truth more possible. This is why James' legacy endures. Because he did not give us a theory. He gave us a posture, a willingness to ask, what does this idea do? Who does it help? How can I live it better today than I did yesterday? And finally, he leaves us with a question that does not resolve, but deepens. What idea, if you lived it fully, would change the way you walk through this world and the world itself? If this journey awakens something in you, if an idea moved from thought to practice, from theory to truth, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with 3 people who are ready to stop thinking harder and start thinking more honestly.